Hello, everybody, and welcome to What Does Danné Say? Today we're going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be a little more difficult for me because I'm going to be interviewed and talking about myself. So without further ado, what do I say and how did it all begin?
You just turned 82 and your career spans over 5 decades. Before we get into that, let's go back to the beginning. What's it like to reflect on the journey that brought you here?
You know, I was thinking about that the other day. When you are 82 or even 80, things change, priorities change. And for those of you that are approaching that particular time of life, you'll see what I mean. Yes, I'm still working. Yes, I'm pretty much cognitive. When I start to slip, that's when I'll know the exit stage left. But you change in priorities, meaning simpler things are more important to you than agendas or running the big race or trying to do this, trying to do that. And then you also think about, what did it all mean? Now, what it means to me, and I hope this reaches out to younger scientists and therapists and even doctors, it's not the success. It's not the fact that they've got emojis of me and bobbleheads and all kinds of stuff everywhere. Or they refer to me as a guru or an icon or any of that. I don't think that way deep in my heart, or even at home. If you saw me at home, you'd go, that's Danné, always in a bathrobe, walking around. All of these things are great. The fame, money, all of that. They're great. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I wish that didn't happen to me. No, it did happen to me. I don't know why or how. I never thought of money, honestly. I just went out and did it. Sometimes I had very little, and yet I was hopping around the world with a little box of slides of before and afters and lecturing on stage, and sometimes the oddest stages you can imagine. One time it was a Grange Hall in Ireland, packed to the ceiling with little old ladies up in front with flaming rosacea cheeks and daddies in the back with the kids up on their shoulders. And I felt like a faith healer. In fact, I did wear a white suit at the time. But it was those things and all the other things that are contained in my book, The Maybelline Prince, available on Amazon. I give all the money to the Harvey Milk Foundation, by the way. It was the journey itself that was the thrill as I look back now, not all the other stuff. The other stuff just came. And I think the advice I would give to any young person starting out now is do what you love best, or at least some facsimile of it, or something that will directly lead to it. Because I know it's hard when you're young, and if you don't have a 9-to-5 or whatever, you have to pay your rent, you have to do all these things. But always try to do something that segues into what you really, really want to do. It's very, very important, because that's the only tool that you have to get out there and be yourself, do exactly what you want without any interference.
What do people get wrong about your journey? Let's set the record straight.
In the beginning, I learned how to handle hecklers, usually from competitors in an audience. I was often hurt and surprised to get those things thrown at me. But over time, it seemed to stop. I don't know how it happened, but it just seemed to stop. And the people that would say things like, oh, this is a fact, it's a known fact, this is the goal. One time I was in Jordan, and I was sitting at a big table with all these local dermatologists and plastic surgeons and so on. And most of them were, accepting my speech and my concept, and they were nodding affirmatively and looking interested. There's one old guy sitting there. Well, to me, this is BS. Everybody knows that peels, the medical peel, is the gold standard of dermatology. Well, yes, these standards were set, and some of them still exist. But in my mind, following the logic of the biology of the human body, there's new standards. And I'm very gratified to say that my team initiated by myself, but mostly my team, have set new standards. In fact, that's what DMK is all about, is standards. And sometimes it's kind of rough. But those can change. The more we discover, the more insight. That's one thing I can truthfully say, even at 82, I'm still in the lab. I'm still looking for things that have not been conquered yet. We have vitiligo to consider. Now I have ichthyosis to consider. That's a rare skin disorder, genetically started, and it's sad, and people live with it all their life. I just met a beautiful young lady who's girlfriend of one of my best friends, Condilo, the Australian rock star, and bless her heart, she has head to foot, and it's heartbreaking even to live with that. We will find a way to get rid of it, or at least some sort of passive, long-term remission.
What's the wildest rumor you've ever heard about yourself?
Well, as I said, in the beginning, I did get some heckling. It was when glycolic acid first came out. The fruit sugar peel, which is not fruit sugar at all. The rumor was they procured the glycolic acid from Dole Pineapple Company or whatever. And it was actually licensed by a doctor and his friend. I can't even remember his name, but he had the only license for a formula. I repeat, a formula that was patented. And I investigated it. And the thing that they were saying the most about glycolic, I don't even use that much in my preparations. It's too unpredictable. Molecule is way too small because wanders in the crevices of the face, cause irritation. But they kept talking about it like it was a moisturizer. And no, it is not a moisturizer. It's hydroscopic. It works off of whatever moisture is in your skin. I won't go into the details now, but basically that's what it is. And so I started writing articles. I was writing in a lot of overseas magazines at that time. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this Swedish company started saying, he's a madman, he's crazy. And then a Dr. Brown in the UK, who happened later on, I found out to have sunk a lot of money into a glycolic acid range, echoed. As they say in Sweden, Danné Montague King is completely crazy, and his ideas about, it was like a conspiracy theory thing, type of thing. That probably was the wildest rumor. I haven't heard, my life has been so eclectic that there's nothing too wild for me. I mean, I'm not going to go into it now. You read the book, you'll see. But they could say what they want, and it wouldn't even come up to reality. But that was the wildest thing I'd ever heard because it ended up in the press. One of the best things, if you're going to speak to people, if you plan to lecture, if you plan to teach, the best thing to do is to know your subject extremely well, have it backed up, but talk about it in analogies. It's fun to use great big $25 medical terms and all that, which I have an associate that does that all the time. And yeah, you do need those, but don't make that the focus of your speech. Don't stand up there and try to say, this is what I know. You're there to inspire and teach somebody else. And so you have to think of what you have to say as a story, do analogies, things like that. So, because people in the audience, a lot of them are very skilled estheticians or skin therapists and whatever have you, but they may not be rocket scientists or they may not be medical doctors, although I've met quite a few medical doctors that forgot everything they learned in medical school. You'd be surprised. I was actually up in front of a group, speaking of Sweden, I was in front of a group of Swedish doctors once, and everything I said, I could see their eyes were glazing over. And I'd, come on, guys, you know this. Think back to medical school. Oh, yeah. Okay, now, we remember. And so always tell your message as a story. That way people not only get it, but they remember it. So many of you know about DMK, about the enzymes, the skin revision, and all of the other things. But do you really know me? I mean, you've seen me in many videos and in person sometimes and so on, but you don't really know what went into the person that's sitting here now talking to you. So let's go back before enzymes and skin revision to a time when I was just a precocious kid with big ideas in small town America. Well, where it began, I popped forth in Queen of Angels Hospital in Los Angeles, California, which is now some kind of dream center. I don't know what's going on up there. It was a cult before that, but now it's Dream Center. So who knows? But that's where I was born. And the family joke was Mama's window faced the Hollywood sign. And when I was an infant, she held me up and I saw the Hollywood sign, and that influenced the rest of my life. I don't know how true that is, but that's the family joke. I was born March 7th, 1943. So I am 82. You know, I've never lied about my age. I could have many, many times. I'm not going to go into all the intrinsic things that I did between that time and the time that I became interested in botany and got my degrees in that and all the other things. But let's segue to Newport Beach, California. That's where I had a clinic that offered every kind of service, including handmade wigs and all kinds of what we called secrets, teaching people how to look better. That's where I met Evelyn F. Williams, the Maybelline heiress. Now, all of this is now available on Amazon Prime for my very first movie, hopefully not my last, called Maybelline Prince, starring Grayson Chance, the young pop star. Many of you love his music. That really kind of goes into that whole era and how she influenced my entire life. I often say, would I be the person I am today if it wasn't for Evelyn F. Williams? I don't know. I often think no, because, you know, before that, I was typical of that era, long flowing hair, rock and roll, smoking homegrown pot, you know, whatever we all did back in those days. I always kind of did my own thing. I never worked for anybody. I'd probably be fired. Actually, I did. One time I worked for an upmarket restaurant in Long Beach, very, very elegant, where they built the dinner at the table. The waiters had their own cutlery and everything. And I hammed my way into the job. I lasted one night. I was horrible. So I always worked for myself. But Evelyn was a dynamic woman, probably the original Me Too. And she was in her, 70s at the time we met, looking far younger. And she had belief in me. Somehow she had a deep-rooted belief in me. And she made me believe in myself. Sometimes the most horrible things would come up when we were in Hot Springs, Arkansas. You know, there was the Dixie Mafia. There was all kinds of things, threats. I had bodyguards, everything. And she would say, Dan, call me Dan, you can do it. You can do it, no matter what. And so I did. And that kind of followed me the rest of my life. And I think about her every single day. As far as my lifestyle, well, I never thought about it. No, I knew I didn't fit in with the rest of the kids, but not because I was gay. That wasn't important to me. What was important was my ideas and how I thought and how I approached things. It was secondary. And I kind of think that's why I was never attacked or beat up or made fun of. I also had a terrible temper, and I was a pretty buff little guy. I had muscles and so on, and I wasn't afraid of anybody. If a bully tried to attack me in any way, I would react strongly, and the reputation kind of spread. Don't mess with him, he's crazy. I played crazy many times. People are afraid of crazy. But I had girlfriends and all that, but I just never really thought about it at all. And no, I know I didn't fit in, but it didn't bother me because I had this strange ability. When I use this word, don't get me wrong, manipulate people. And I don't mean that in a bad way, although it could have been a bad way. But I would present a mirror to them when they would encounter me, and they would see themselves somehow a little bit. And therefore, I was safe. I was someone they could trust, that I was someone that they wanted to be around. So I kind of created my own little world there and pulled whoever I wanted into it, and those that I didn't want to, I avoided. I did this most of my life because, strangely enough, deep down inside in those years, I was never afraid of anything. I hear, oh, don't do this, don't do that, but I just wasn't afraid. 82 is a different story. You start looking where you walk, you start how you jump on the bed. I mean, a lot of old things happen, but in those days, no. How did I navigate? Well, someone asked me once, how did you navigate your sexual identity in the 50s and 60s? Well, like I said, I just didn't think about it. And I did suffer entrapment once I was 18 and there was a bar in Hollywood called the Red Raven. And it was New Year's Eve. And I had a friend that was a waiter in a high-end place, little short back guy. He drove a Lincoln Town Car. So I was impressed. I've had so many town cars since then. Now I drive Jags. But he invited me to the bar. And I could get into bars in those days. I had this way of seeming older, and I guess it was the way I talked and moved. They didn't even think I was a kid. So I was in there, and it was like 12 o'clock midnight, and everybody's toasting and dancing, and suddenly this guy in a plaid coat and a party hat comes up to me, and he grabs me. And I thought, well, you don't have to grab, just ask. The frog marched me out, showed me his badge, and it was the police. I forget what they call it. Vice. And they hauled me off to jail overnight. Well, my waiter friend got me out on bail, and I had to go to court in Beverly Hills. And so I showed up to court. I looked like a Republican kid. I had my hair parted on the side, combed over short, had a plaid blazer, nice shirt and tie. And I stood up in front of the judge and said, Your Honor, I don't know what happened. I was running around trying to look for a party with my friends, and I saw this bar and a lot of people in front. I went in. Next thing you know, I'm being arrested, and I really don't understand this. What does this mean? What does gay mean? Well, Harry Weiss, the lawyer, gay lawyer, happened to be in the courtroom, and he piped up and said, Your Honor, I will handle this case. And His Honor let me go. And Harry Weiss, of course, invited me up to his home in Hollywood Hills to a party and tried to, whatever. And I said, no, you don't do that to me. I wasn't interested anyway. He's a skinny little old man. But there were some other stories about him and a lot of people in West Hollywood in those days that was pretty, well, the series Hollywood was true almost to the T because I lived it. I was there when all of that was going on. I talked to Scotty Bauer about that. He's passed away, but he wrote that expose book where he, at a gas station where he was pimping stars, getting people for stars, straight, gay, whatever type of thing. And it was all true.
So, Danné, before DMK, what inspired you to start tinkering with formulations?
Funny that you should ask that. And I've been asked it 100,000 times by press all over the world. Well, the only thing I can say is I was always fascinated both by plants and by chemistry. And my parents bought me these, in those days it was Gilbert chemistry sets, so they kept getting bigger and bigger. But I kept reading books on how to macerate plants to draw off the extracts, how to do this, how to do that. I was fascinated. Now, to be honest with you, I also wanted to be a magician. I was practicing magic tricks. And in my mind, it was all flowing the same way. I truly believe that plants and that had magical powers and so on and so forth. And so it was kind of this fascination with these two things combined together. And all those years, I was always called a pretty boy. From the time I can remember as a little kid, my aunts, everybody around me, mostly women, always such a pretty boy, such a pretty boy. Well, when you tell a kid that over and over, he thinks he's a pretty boy. And all of a sudden, one day, when I was around 15, boop, 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 pimples started. And at first, I panicked, absolutely panicked. And Mama, of course, put things on my face and so on and so forth. And then suddenly it just broke out, acne vulgaris. I didn't know at that time that my testosterone levels were early on. Maybe that's what gave me my temper. Don't know. But she took me to every dermatologist in the city. They all did the same damn thing, tetracycline, some kind of ointment, whatever, and nothing worked. And so I started working on myself. I knew basically that enzymes dissolve proteins. So I tried to do plant enzyme packs and things like that. I did change my diet. My mom was a big fan of Gaylord Hauser, big Hollywood nutritionist at that time. So I would sneak in her books and I would change my diet. I went swimming in the sea all the time. I'm sure that sodium pulls fluids to itself. And all these things combined was curing or getting rid of my early on teenage acne. And it didn't happen until I went up to Vancouver, British Columbia with a group of dancers from Israel, these young kids that were the dancing team. And I got to know one of them, Joel, and they invited me up to join them. And so we were staying at a hotel on English Bay. And I had this little flowered Hawaiian brown and orange bathing suit. And I'm only mentioning this, as the punchline of this particular story. And I was laying in the beach down from the other kids, still reticent to join the group, still self-conscious, because I really never looked at myself in the mirror during this time. I just didn't want to see, what was there. And I kind of like, okay. I needed a soda, so I went up to the hotel close to the beach. I walked in and I was going to order a soda from the concession stand, and I saw this young, tan, nicely built, handsome young boy walking towards me, flawless skin, wearing the same bathing suit. And I thought, oh, gee, I wish I looked like that. And then suddenly I realized it was a huge floor-to-ceiling mirror at the end of the corridor, and it was me. Well, the lady in the concession stand thought I went crazy. I was posing and laughing and carrying on. And after that, I became the most obnoxious little brat you could possibly imagine. I was sleeping with everybody, even celebrities that's another story. But it changed me completely. And I think that kind of segued through my whole career. If you can change a skin, you can change a life. Because it just kind of built, in my mind subliminally from that point. What was aesthetics like in the 1970s? Well, first of all, there wasn't that term. At all. It was females doing facials, and most of the time they were from Europe. They were doyens of the facial industry. Elizabeth Arden, of course, did facials at the Red Door salons. Iona of Hungary was another one. Oh, there were several. And they had it all wrapped up. And in those days, there wasn't, single income in families with the husband doing the work. It wasn't like Mad Men. Now, when I saw the series Mad Men and the redheaded gal, forget her name, with the nice build, it's real, guys, totally real, is a client of mine. She comes in here every so often, and she goes to DM Gate clinics when she films around the world in other movies. But these women, of course, had nothing to do except take care of kids. And if they had money, then they would lunch. They would meet downtown for lunch, and they would go to Elizabeth Arden or Iona or whatever, have facials, or body, whatever, hair, nails, makeup, etc. And so aesthetics wasn't even known in those times. In my shop in Newport Beach, it was called the Londoner Wig Boutique, I was doing all of these things simply because I wanted to. I was using people and charging them money, not like now, but a little bit of money. And I knew safety regulations too, almost like guinea pigs. In fact, Evelyn F. Williams, Maybelline heiress, was one of my first guinea pigs. One time, I had a back room with the couches with a nice quilt, and she believed in my treatments 100%. And so I did one on her, and she was laying there. Now, one of the applications contains copper chlorophyllin, so it's green. And so she was laying there quietly, softly snoring. And my friend Bobby Shannon came in, a young guy. And he goes, "Have you seen Miss Williams lately?" I says, "Bobby, I don't know what I'm going to do." He says, "What's wrong?" "Well, she came in and she got to have her wigs done, and she got faint. And I told her she could lay down in the back, and she's not moving. What am I going to do? What if she's dead?" He says, "Well, let me see." So he peeked around and looked, and she did look like a, a green face, a pin light. He ran screaming out of the shop, and the police station was right across the street. And I started laughing because I didn't want him to get the police in there. But I paid no attention to what was popular in the way of facials. In other words, again, I was just doing my own thing. And when people heard about it, they came in and had it done. I'm also been asked that, what was your very first formula? Well, I don't think there was a first. There wasn't a eureka moment. There seldom is in true science. Only in marketing are there eureka moments. New, revolutionary, blah, blah, blah. No, I think the first thing I had to do was to reestablish the acid mantle. Now, that's our only true moisturizer. In fact, the very word moisturizer was invented in 1962 by a New York advertising company to sell beauty creams. Creams are delivery systems. They have very little to do with moisturizing. Sudoriferous secretion, which is basically water from our sweat gland, and sebaceous secretion from our sebaceous gland, rise up every few hours when we're young with that flawless skin. We're not putting anything on it, particularly when we're very young. And they occlude together and form the acid mantle. Slightly antibiotic, but so-called moisturizing. So that was my very first approach, is let's get that replicated. So to this day, the same exact formula, CBE and urban mineralness, comes from that time period. I was experimenting with the enzyme treatment sporadically, as I told you about Evelyn F. Williams saying there. And then it became mainstream. And I realized soon that you can't just do that. You have to come up with putting things back into the skin. Because with all of the plasmatic effect and all of the things that the enzymatic treatments do, if you don't do anything afterwards, eventually the skin's going to dehydrate. It's going to dehydrate the hell out of the skin. So we had to put things back in the skin that the skin recognized, because skin cells don't accept anything they don't recognize. That's why we have the word essential amino acids, essential vitamins, etc. Essential meaning the body doesn't make it on its own. It has to come from an outside source. So I just moved along with products after that. And in those days, all I had was deep pore cleanser, which was a deep pore cleanser, milk cleanser, which I added lipids to it because there were people that, certain racial characteristics such as German, Irish, fair people with thin skin, kind of a lipid dry skin, and deep pore wouldn't suit. So I had that. I had Pro Amino Cream, was my first cream that obviously supplied the skin with the essential amino acids. And then Creme Citrique, which was a low pH cream. That was for people with darker toned skin, brighten them up. Black, some Asian, Hispanic, etc. And then I had to have an age management one, which was Biogen C. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story that nobody knows about. I actually added Procaine to Biogen C. I colored it with blueberry juice because I wanted a different color, not everything white. And I added Procaine. Why Procaine? Well, I think it was an early Botox, because Procaine is, as you may know, is an anesthetic. So applied to the stressed out skin, it would slightly deaden the ganglia leading to the skin, and the skin would smooth out. And it worked really, really good. I wish we could do it again. If I could get one of the Cane sisters, lidocaine, Procaine, benzocaine, back into formula, I would do it. But that would mean we'd have to go full medical. And until they change rules, I can't use it. But it was really, really good. FDA found out about it. They didn't get mad. I've never been in trouble with the FDA, touch wood. They've always contacted me. I would explain what I was doing. I'd say, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. And that was it. So you don't have to be afraid when you're learning. After several years, yes, they know your name, they know your brand. Of course, they're going to jump all over you if you try to do something that's not in their requirements. Now for the horror stories. Again, touch wood. The first big horror story, well, I'm going to only tell one. There's only been two, but I don't know if I can legally talk about the other one. Both of them were due to arrogance and pride and ego on my part. I advise anybody watching us strongly, if you're dealing with a lot of people and you become somebody of any degree of fame, even small or large, be humble. Do not be arrogant, because it can get you in a lot of trouble. I was in London one time, and we had rented a huge suite at Grosvenor House, the kind of suite that only rich Arab families are in. It had the living room with a fireplace, 3 complete ensuite bedrooms, a kitchen, a dining room. It was just incredible. And a friend of mine who was a travel agent got it on practically for nothing. She was very good at getting hotel venues for us for practically nothing, under the auspices that we're going to recommend it on our travel people, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, our local distributor at the time was a family from Northern England. They came down, a couple of therapists, and we set the ladies' bedroom into a clinic. And they brought a woman in she was from Brazil. And I didn't even think about that. That's when I started really paying attention to ethnicities and people that are predisposed to hyperpigmentation are protected against solar damage to a degree. So anyway, I had just launched what we call the Pro Alpha 6-layer peel. And she said, "Oh, I want this desperately, but I'm very sensitive." So Cynthia, my travel agent, gave her a Darvocet. Now, again, that was a mistake. I didn't give it. She did. It was her own personal stash, to calm her down, and I did the work on her, and all the press were staring. Newbie Hands, one of their top journalists, was there. It was really a good time. I really was thrilled with the way it all turned out, until I got to Israel the next week. I was in my hotel, and the reception kept calling me. They said, "There's a lady from London that's really upset. She's trying to get a hold of you." And I said, "Well, give me your number." So they gave me her number. I called her, and it was this woman. And she was crying. She said, "I want to find you and shoot you, and then shoot myself. I am a monsterola," or whatever you say in Spanish. Forgot, whatever. Oh boy. I had to do some fast thinking then. And I remained calm. So keep that in mind. If you ever get a disgruntled client to any degree, just remain calm and professional. Don't react to their trauma, because they are going through trauma. And what had happened was she ended up with some hyperpigmentation, quite a lot of hyperpigmentation. Now, I knew that one of the London therapists, her name was Susie, she was a Chinese girl, very, very good. I knew that she could sort her out. But the bad thing about it was this was a diplomat's wife. And had she gone to the press instead of contacting me, I would have been finished. That's all I would need, American scientist ruins diplomat's wife, severely scarred, whatever. Well, Susie did sort her out. I told the woman the truth. I said, "My dear, I'm so sorry, but with all that big press there, I was showing off. And we've never had this problem before, but it would be you that has to go through it. But it's taught me a big fat lesson." And I said, "Now, this can be reversed, but you'll have to go to Susie." And of course, I had to pay for it. I didn't expect Susie to do it for free. But yeah, that was pretty big horror. Oh, one more horror story involving a celebrity. We opened up at number 1 Harley Street, and DMK is still offered there at one point. And again, all the London press came. And this little girl that was working for, I forget which publication, probably one of the yellow tabloids. She was just new on the job, new reporter. And she had this cheat sheet, we call it, where they had questions down to ask whoever they're interviewing. And it came to Brad Pitt. And she goes, "I understand that you do Brad Pitt." And I said, "No, I do not do Brad Pitt." I said, "There's a woman in Van Nuys who has a celebrity spa." And that was true. She's passed away. And her name is Lynetta Grant, Lenetta. Make sure she wrote it down, Grant. And Mr. Pitt was making a movie called 7 Years in Tibet. where he had to pose as this young German mountain climber with flawless Aryan skin. Now, Brad I don't see him much anymore, but back in those days, he had some cuneiform acne scars, hence the name Pitt problem. Just kidding. He did have a few cuneiform scars that did not, in fact, I think he needed them because he was just too pretty for words. So that kind of, gave the masculine balance. But the studio said they would pay for treatments, and he went to Lynetta, and she smoothed his skin out. And so all was great. I was on the plane back with Randy Larson, my partner, and I happened to, it was the Evening Standard, I think. I still have the article somewhere. I opened it up, and there was a big picture of Brad Pitt and another picture of me, actually not a bad picture for that time. My arms folded, and it said, Brad Pitt, skin doctor. And it went on to suggest that I did him for every movie in his life, that he would look like a dog except for me. I mean, it was horrible. Yellow journalism at its worst. And he even talked about my townhouse on the beach and my estate in the hills and all this, on and on and on and on, that I only touched celebrities. And that actually gave me a bad reputation for a long time. I would read in other magazines and other articles that he only does celebrities. That's why you don't see him too much, just because it's all secret. And it was horrible. Some people might have jumped up and down over that, but I didn't. And I immediately called his publicist, a nice lady, and she asked me Lynetta Grant's number. I told Lynetta about it, and she asked for the publicist's number. She goes, don't worry, Danné, I'm going to put a stop to this. Again, I thought this has gone away, and then I get a call from his personal manager, who was, part of your anatomy that you're sitting on. And I go, you know what, Mr. Whoever? I says, I happen to know that you're punting 2 films for Mr. Pitt right now. And as you can see, I know how to get publicity, so let's go. The poor skin doctor that's being hammered by the big movie star over a complete lie written by a journalist. I said, you should be calling that newspaper, not me. Click. Well, I never heard anything about it. I don't even know if Brad even knows about this. I've often thought, since I am a movie producer now, that I might run into him one day in town and I'd say, you know what? And tell him the story. I think he'd be quite amused. But those are the 2 worst experiences I can think of in my entire career. All right, how did I start my career? Well, as far as start beyond the Newport Beach and other, not going to go all into it, but I did develop a kit for Black people called Eon 5. And it was being sold in JCPenney's. I wasn't doing professional. I had a clinic in Chicago on Pearson, but Beyond 5 was contracted by a Pakistani group of gentlemen that wanted to make money in the skin business. And I was being very successful with Black skin. I studied it copiously, and then later on in South Africa, even more. And so I put together this kit. It was 5 pieces. The Black men really liked it because it really did help eradicate razor bumps, which were and are still a huge consideration nowadays, something that they don't like. And God bless them, I don't like it either. It went very well. I had to make personal appearances all the time at JCPenney's. One time I was invited up to Detroit because I told the head buyer in New York of Penny's, you got to get me some publicity if you want this to fly. And so she got me a spot on 12 o'clock news and a Risa Williams show in Detroit. And Risa was a beautiful Black lady, but very austere. And in the green room before the broadcast, she goes, you're not to say anything commercial. I understand you're only going to talk science about Black skin, right? I said, of course. I don't like doing commercial things, and I don't still. In my articles, you hardly ever see me mention anything about products or even DMK. So we're sitting there, and I'm telling her all the differences between Black skin and white, the physiological differences. And I led with the term Black skin cells are superior to white skin cells. Well, she perked up at that. So I went on through the whole thing. And somewhere toward the end of the interview, she goes, this all sounds great. Where can we get this kind of help? on air, live. I said, I'll be at the Northland Mall at 3 o'clock. She said, later, she said, well, I won't say what she said, but anyway. And I did. I went out to the Northland Mall, and the power of media, they had a queue stretching all the way out to the atrium. And I was there all day, over and over and over again, with all black women and a few black guys. So that's actually what got me overseas, because the Pakistani group decided they were going to launch in London. And they launched at Earl's Court in a big exhibition in London. And that's how I met my first distributor of Europe. Her name was Phyllis Cardwell. She's still around. She came to visit me a couple of years ago after all these years. And that's what got me started in London. And then one of their top publications, Les Nouvelles Esthétiques, Professional Beauty, asked me to write articles. And I did, and that spread, and other countries read the articles, and that's how it all developed. And I didn't have any money then. I would take courier tickets to London. Courier tickets are where a company gives you manuscripts or whatever in a sealed bag, and you have to hand deliver them to the address in the other country. And they would pay for the cheapest seat they could possibly get. And so that's how I went back and forth. But I just went out and did it with no money. And with the message, and it just built from there. It wasn't until my partner, Randy Larson, came aboard that we started really making money, because he's an expert, general manager of everything. I was like a ship in full sail, leaking all over the place. I had no concept of money. I still don't. I know I have it, but I don't think about it. Probably never will. But he kept that ship steady. And then my nephew, Drew Coleman, came aboard and started the United States, which is now, there's not a state you can go into, I don't think, that we don't have DMK clinics. So basically, that's how it all happened, just by basically doing it. Now, most of you professionals know that there's a lot of fluff in the industry and marketing. Well, any industry, to be honest about you. Marketing is marketing. And we've all been annoyed by repetitive commercials. I know I am. I can't stand it sometimes. I want to shoot the television screen, because they do it over and over and over, the same thing all along. And the industry was starting to build while I was overseas. Now, some of the estheticians here knew about me, but not everybody. Then I started writing articles for Dermoscope and Les Nouvelles Esthétiques, and more started contacting me. How did I persuade them to leave what they were doing? Well, first of all, there's a thing we call results. When you see results, even from the very first time, and I don't mean a complete cure or everything's fixed in one treatment. Some people actually claim that with a product. I mean results, ongoing results. It wasn't hard. And not to mention the fact that we did everything differently. We made them feel professional. We emphasize concept as opposed to product. We've never been product-oriented. Yes, of course we have products, and I happen to think they're the best ones in the world. But they're still just tools in a kit with which you initiate the concept. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So, it started basically like that, word of mouth. We didn't have a lot of money to advertise, a lot outside of my articles in the magazines. I really have to thank the editors, because the ones that are still around, because they took my articles, because I didn't mention products, and they gave me all that space. And I know they were hoping that one day I would buy a full page ad or half page or whatever, and we do now, of course. But basically, that's how we started. The concept was based on 4 pillars that we still use. And in fact, these 4 pillars are all you can really do with skin. And that's remove, rebuild, protect, maintain. RRPM. We actually use that as a hashtag now on t-shirts. What does remove mean? Well, remove means to remove all of the damage brought about by whatever skin anomaly you're thinking of, okay? Rebuild means to offer the skin all of the right chemistry that it recognizes to proliferate new, strong, and healthy skin cells, because most of the time people are slowed down, sluggish, and look older. Protect means after doing all this work, it would be stupid, especially nowadays in climate change, which really exists, folks. You have to protect the work. Solar damage is more insidious now than it ever was before. I've seen more basal cell carcinomas and even melanomas than I'd ever seen before in my lifetime. A famous movie star is a friend of mine, and she has suffered many of them because she burned her face severely many years ago while filming a film. And they put it under a sun lamp to give her a tan to go along with her role in the film. So we basically have remove, rebuild, protect, maintain as our mantra, and it's exactly how we teach and how we initiate all of our progressive treatments. I'm often asked by press, when did you launch this, or what was your defining moment? Or there never really was one. I always somehow had a celebrity hanging around that I worked on. Most of that was through social contact, or, there's an old film back in the 80s, I think, 70s or 80s with, I forget the name, the English actor, Peter, he did Pink Panther, I can't think of his name. Anyway, it was called Being There. And it had the American actress, I can't think of her, see, short-term memory loss at 82. I'll think about it the minute I finish this segment. But the point was, the actor played a gardener. He was a gardener for a rich old man in New York. He was left on a doorstep as a baby. The old man's family took him in. They didn't tell anybody, and they raised him up to be a gardener. And that's all he knew, was gardening. That's all he could talk about. Well, the old man passed away. And his kids came to the house and had things moved, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't know that hidden away in a suite of rooms was this gardener. Chauncey Gardner was his name. And somehow we got tired of just sitting there and watching TV. The electricity was going to be turned off, I guess. I don't know. Forget that part of the movie. But anyway, he went into the old man's closet and got all his beautiful clothes, the best Savile Row clothes, hat, cane, everything, and went out into the world. And without deviating from his gardening experience and the way he talked, he ended up in all of the high social circles, all of Washington, D.C. And at the end of the movie, they're trying to think of who's going to be the next president, whatever party was talking about it. And someone says, what about Chauncey Gardner? And the other guy says, you know what? And the last scene showed Chauncey Gardner with his cane in Hamburg walking on water across the pond in Central Park. It's called Being There is the movie. Try to see it. It's still available. Being There. And that's kind of like what I was. I was just there. So there was no, because a defining moment. I never thought about that. I wasn't a marketing person in that way. We have it in in my profile. There is years of things I discovered. I didn't discover anything. It's always there. My job as a scientist is to observe what's there and work with it. You don't discover, only, who discovers or creates. But there is different years where certain new things came to pass, but I cannot really recall any single moment where I went, this is what I'm doing, or I've made this, or just never have. It's just been a journey all this time, and that is really the truth.
How did you go from self-taught formulator to industry disruptor?
Industry. I actually couldn't do that now. Yeah, one thing that changes when you get older is that you become kinder. Hopefully everybody does. Although there are some people who get meaner, but I think they're suffering from pre-dementia or things like that. And they know it, so they become cranky. I'm not there yet. Maybe. Yes, I suppose I was a disruptor simply because I followed logic and truth. And I would write articles about things that were being sold in the industry that were ripping the therapist off, things that were bogus and didn't really work. I would never name names of companies. I would never name names of products. But I would talk about it scientifically in such a fashion that everybody knew what I was talking about. But what I was really doing, I wasn't trying to disrupt or shift the attention to me, a little bit maybe, but not really. What I was trying to do is to educate and inspire therapists to learn how to make choices. You know, if somebody makes all these claims and they're saying things like, at the cellular level, that's a biggie now, cellular level, ask them for proof, research. Now, what you'll get is either no reply if you email, or you'll get a whole bunch of research that's not really directly related to their product or whatever. I mean, they think you're not going to read it all. Oh, well, that's good. That's a bunch of references. So you have the right as a practitioner that's touching people and charging money for it to ask these questions. You can ask any DMK practitioner and they will tell you what you want to hear. And if they don't know, they'll get the answer for you and we will tell the truth. But there is a lot of myths out there, and I don't enjoy myth busting anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. But I feel it's still necessary to help people make decisions. At what point did I realize I was a global brand? You know, in the beginning, I never thought of that, of being a brand. As a matter of fact, brand was not a good connotation for me. I don't know why. It just sounded so commercial, brand. But we did become a brand when people started doing things exactly from one country to the next, given ethnic, differences and things like that. In the beginning, it wasn't that way. In Germany, 999. We don't think this way in Germany. We do our own way. And I heard that in all the countries. And I was getting tired of it. And it occurred to me that if we become more of a brand, then people will follow suit. And everything would come from headquarters here. And of course, in translation and traditions are observed. We know all that. That's fine. But not the science part. It's the same everywhere. People are people, regardless of tone, color, traditions, whatever. Okay? It's when we started showing up in every country that you can think of. We still have some left to do, but we're almost there, that I started to realize the responsibility of being a global brand. And that's when I was happy to see reciprocity. Now, who created the reciprocity? Facebook, early Facebook. Now Facebook is just a bunch of ads, really. I still look at it, but not like in the beginning. It really was a social platform. And I saw that therapists were helping each other from country to country. Someone would post a picture of a terrible skin anomaly on a woman or man or whatever, and little Susie Stupid-Fetchit over here in Spain or in Ukraine or in Russia or Norway would answer them and give benefit of their experience. And I thought this was great. And so we encouraged this hands across the sea type of thing. We're probably more diplomatic than any other company in the whole world based on this principle. There's no political, none of that. It's just people reaching out to people to help them in their profession. And we have to answer that call. And so far, we always have. We use the word paramedical a lot, and it really is our own creation. And it doesn't mean instead of cosmetic surgery or dermatology type of things, it means adjunct to. And so it's helping with. We have a lot of clients, especially in Ukraine, Russia, and parts of Europe, and starting to happen in this country, where the doctors really depend on DMK to make their work look better. For instance, a plastic surgeon, he or she can be assured that if their client has at least a month before their operation, or 3 months preferably, but let's say a month, the chances of hypertrophic scars or lividity in scars or hematomas, all that are practically non-existent. And if they do happen, are controlled and removed. So it's paramedical means adjunct to. As far as the term skin revision, I coined that term a long time ago because I was tired of hearing facial. Tell me about your facials. What does facial mean? It means to me massage, pamper, poo, the old classic facial. Now, there's nothing wrong with massage. It does have many benefits, but basically that's what it was, and that's not what we do. We can do it, but that's not our focus. And so I came up with revision. What does revision mean? It means simply to revise skin back to the way it was meant to be originally without solar damage and all the other things that attack us on a daily basis. Because we all started out with good skin. And so that's when I say revision, bring it back. We're not changing anything. We're just taking it back. And it's very, very capable of doing that. Skin does have cell memory. It really does. And basically that's what skin revision means. So when I talk to a group that may not have heard of that, I explain what I just said to you, and then, they start nodding their head. Why? Because it's logical. If you speak with logic, you speak with power, because logic is what things really are, not what we should think of them or how they're perceived to be, but what they really are. I have been asked occasionally, not too much, by the press, usually the LGBTQ press, that I've been openly gay all my entire life, even when it was dangerous. I think the danger, because I was very young, socially I'm talking about, the other parts before I was a teenager, family members, church members, it's chance encounters. I was a little horn dog from age 12. I won't go into all that, but when I became age accountability, again, I just never thought about it. And I knew it was illegal. They had terrible, I would hate to be on the vice squad because they had guys above in the ceilings of public restrooms are peering through holes in the wall. I mean, come on. And it was a lot of entrapment. And because of the stigma, because remember, it wasn't too far before that era that homosexuality was considered a mental illness. You were crazy or something, whatever. Or in the Christian circles, you were demon possessed. Anyway, so it was a stigma. But there was something exciting about it because the gay bars that we'd go in were always hidden away, maybe a little neon sign with the name. It was like a secret world, and I was getting away with something. And of course, since I was allegedly a pretty boy, everybody was after me. So I had got a lot of attention. But I was still pretty pick and choose. I was very definite about myself. And that's one little advice that I would throw out here is when you're young and you're starting, know who you are and go from there. If you know who you are, don't waste time saying, well, I'm going to do this and that for a few years till I find myself. Come on. So you know who you are and be that. So I really didn't feel scared or anything like that. But yeah, it was, law enforcement was really heavy duty until the late 70s. Now, in the book, The Maybelline Prince, the movie is Maybelline Prince, there was a time toward the end of that story where I was asked by the local FBI in Little Rock, Arkansas, to lecture about homosexuality. And the reason why is because the gay movement was just starting then. I don't know the exact date of Stonewall as opposed to that date, so I'm not going to say it was after Stonewall. But it was a time when there was a certain amount of activism and things like that. So the law enforcement agencies they politically knew they had to deal with this. It was too big. So they wanted to know how to deal with these people, this community, and they asked me to do it. Now, I don't know what they think. It was a Mr. Carter, a very nice guy that was the head agent that contacted me. And I guess he thought because I was rich and well-known and the Maybelline thing and the fire and all the other, gossip that went around, that I would be a I would use myself as a gay person to talk about it. Well, I knew that is what he was thinking. So I showed up at the lecture hall. The room was packed with troops, all in uniforms, male and female alike. There was police, there were FBI agents, they had on suits, they had other state police, etc. And I stood up in a three-piece banker's suit and had a big blackboard, and I was talking about homosexuality like I was a university professor. I wrote big letters, homosexuality, and then I listed each member of the community. I started with older men, younger men, and older men, how it can reverse, whereas there are younger men that were hustlers that would take advantage of older men, and vice versa. I described female impersonators, drag queens. I described, in those days, there wasn't anything like a transgender. It was transsexuals, and I hadn't dealt with I had met transsexuals before. I met Christine Jorgensen before she died, and Dr. Renee Richards, who I think might still be alive. She's pretty old now. So I knew about these things. So I would talk about them not like the people that are different, but subjects and particular lifestyles. And they all listened with rapt attention. I mean, they were I think a couple of people were taking notes. And got to the point where I started to talk about love between gay people. And that's when they looked uncomfortable. And one guy in the front piped up and said, well, I sure love my fellow troops here, but I wouldn't sleep with any of them. And I looked around and go, yeah, I can see why. And they all started laughing. And if you can get an audience to laugh, you've got them. They're pretty much on your side. And so it went from there, and at the very end, this woman trooper was sitting in the back, great big chest type thing. I was a little suspicious about her, and she barked out, well, ain't it true, King, that y'all yourself are homosexual? And I was just waiting for that. And I looked at her and I said, my dear, I am not homosexual. I'm not asexual. I'm not bisexual. I'm not heterosexual. What in the hell are you? I go, I'm just sexual. And they all applauded and started laughing. And Mr. Carter came over to me at the end. He goes, you know what, would you be willing to go on a circuit of law enforcement around the country? The government will pay you. And I didn't turn it down. I could just see what would happen. I wouldn't be here today if I did that, I'm sure. But that was an unusual moment. And ironically enough, that was the same week that Harvey Milk was assassinated in San Francisco. And I thought about it later. He was being shot down for the same message that I was giving that was getting applause. Go figure. I think presentation, and I still say to this day, presentation is everything. I think from that point, it was natural that I end up being the only global ambassador for the Harvey Milk Foundation. And this was conferred upon me on my 70th birthday by none other than Stuart Milk, who is Harvey's nephew, who's picked up the gauntlet and has gone forth all over the world. This man is a humble man. He never pushes his own agenda. He's tall, taciturn, kind of somber looking, but he has met everybody who's anybody, statesmen, politicians. I've been in the White House 3 times because of him. I've had ambassadors help me out with great big anniversary celebrations in other countries at the U.S. Embassy because of him. He's opened many doors for us, and in turn, we treat it like a business. We donate heavily to the Harvey Milk Foundation. And we're very open about that. Why not? You can treat any charity as a business, and it'll actually do better than if you treat it as some ego trip. A lot of A lot of CEOs and heads of companies like to get their wife dressed up and go to a big charity banquet and all of that and stand up and puff their chest. Yeah, I gave $2 million. Well, that's not what it is. It's he opens doors, we donate. But I donate from the heart too, because it's not just LGBTQ. It's human rights. We donate for women's rights. We donate for gifted youngsters that are poor and maybe have a very bad family that they can't escape from. And they have dreams of being a big singer or a musician or a writer or an actor, whatever. But they don't think any of these dreams will come to any kind of fruition. But they dream. So I started my own 501c3 called Emerald Kingdom in Palm Springs, California, who generates funds also for the Harvey Milk Foundation. And we are that spotlight on those kids, because I found out anytime you take a kid off the streets that has those kind of ambitions or aspirations, let's say dancer, we've done this, and put them in a show and give them professional training and in front of a well-to-do audience, they're a star for that time period. And when they go back to school, they no longer sleep with kids in their peer group that they feel they have to because they're picked on or made fun of just to belong, or do drugs just to belong. They go, I don't have to do any of that. I'm a star. I'm going to be somebody, off. Goodbye. So basically, the advocacy, I can't twist my tongue around that word, being an activist for the Harvey Milk Foundation has not only given me a great deal of insight into people around the world, but it also has been a lot of fun, doing all of these types of things. Actually, I invented the DMK Limited range that we had for a while, luxury range, just as a vehicle for the Harvey Milk Foundation. And on the inside of the box, the Transgenesis cream, that was the first product, there was a whole story about Harvey Milk Foundation. And this cream was selling like crazy in Russia, where, most of you may or may not know that it's frowned upon. You don't dare say anything, even though they have loads and loads and loads of nightclubs and underground stuff, Oh, well. Another story. The beauty industry would attract LGBTQ plus people simply because of its fluidity and transformational things. When, like I said earlier in this podcast, change the skin, change the life. That falls right in line with LGBTQ plus people. Plus, they can also be in a position of guidance and counseling. I've often said, and in fact, we have a class downstairs right now I'm going to drop in and say hi to, that a good therapist is a father, confessor, you name it. This client, mostly women, and sometimes men, will tell you things that they won't tell their own husband or best friend. You have their confidence. They trust you. And this attracts people who feel that they need to communicate with the public writ large, but have a hard time doing it in a normal social life. So yeah, we've always supported that. But this company is extremely diverse, because when we interview people, I'm not interviewing them like, oh, you're gay, so therefore you're going to fit in. No, I interview them on their merits and what they can produce. But at the same time, at the same token, I recognize the lifestyle. They feel comfortable, and many feel like they have a home. Because many people that are in these lifestyles are in situations that are not nice. And here, they can just be themselves, and we don't care. It's not important. It was never important to me in my early career. It shouldn't be important to anybody. It should be what they are, the last consideration when you're working someplace. Transgender clients have a special place in my heart simply because I worked with transsexual people back in the 60s. I was working with Dr. Stone at Harbor General. He was doing the full transition surgeries at that time. There was a couple of others. There was a Dr. Otto in San Francisco that specialized in various types of, jaw revision and feminization of the face, etc. And this was mostly male to female type of situations. I hired one lady, Billy. I took her head out of the oven once when I went up to her apartment in Costa Mesa, knocked on the door. It was open. I could hear weird sounds. I walked in and she had head in the oven with the blanket over the whole thing. She was trying to kill herself. Turned off the gas, got her out of there, talked to her for hours and hours, and eventually she came and worked with me down at my clinic. But I was working with Dr. Stone, and my job was to teach, I don't know how to put this, to teach feminization, simply because a lot of the guys that Stone sent to me came like truck drivers. A lot of them, there's different rules in those days. There was so many years of psychoanalysis. There was so many years of this, the hormones. And then you had to live for a year as a female in society and pass, and then you could have the operation. There's a lot of other things that went into that too. So they came to me to find this out because a lot of the transsexuals in those days, I can think of two, thought that once they had this and everything else, that they didn't have to care about makeup or anything. Just be like a farmer lady. Well, sorry, but binary women do wear makeup. They do exfoliate and they do remove hair under the arms and on the, all those little things. And that's what I taught them, how to minimize the overly masculine features, maximize, and so on and so forth. And later on in my life, I started doing an altered, we call it my altered persona. And it wasn't drag or anything like that. I just had the ability to imitate certain old movie stars, Sophia Loren being the predominant one. And all of that went into that. Little things like hand gestures, hold these two fingers together when moving the hands, and just how to get into a car, stick your butt in first, swing your legs right, all these little things I would teach these people, plus hair, plus, all that other stuff too. But yeah, I just had a soft spot in my heart for people that had the courage to do this. If you think it's easy, if you think it was just makeup and hair and so on, no. It's very difficult. You have to deal with parental things that are not nice a lot of times, acceptance things. Some of them would disappear. I would always encourage transsexual people of that time to just go into mainstream. Once everything is complete, this is who you are. This is what you always felt you were. Now this is who you are. Go into mainstream. Don't hang out at drag shows and stuff like that, all the time, unless you happen to like drag shows. But just disappear into mainstream. And some did. I have a couple working for me now that have done just that. They have kids, and you would just see them as an ordinary, nice couple. If you met them, you wouldn't even know at all that the man basically, biologically, was a woman at birth. So, Daniel Dixon, our Australian former distributor, told me one time, he says, I've noticed one thing about you, Danné. You always seem to support the underdogs. And yes, I do. And why? Well, number one, it's called pay forward. I've had a very charmed life. I've had a lucky life. Not without tragedy, not without drama, but still in all, a lucky life. And I feel that I have to pass that on to younger people that were not so lucky or who don't have the courage to step out and be exactly who they are. So this is one of the reasons I get involved with all of this. Sometimes it backfires, but most of the time it does change a life.
After 82 years, you're still innovating.
LaConde, this brilliant medical doctor, biophysicist, his credits are a mile long. India, than me, I don't think Dr. LaConde is even 50 yet. Because he comes in and fills in all the blank spaces of my concept. I think, as I said before, like a concept. But there's always these little blank spaces in between that have to be filled out to describe the content of the concept. Kids are getting smarter nowadays, despite what the media says about education and all that. Kids are smart. I was at a piano recital for my little niece and nephew. I'm the great uncle. I keep repeating that. Oh boy. Anyway, it's my nephew's kids. Anyway, they did a piano recital and singing, and the little Chinese girl was up on the stage as the MC. She's a tiny little thing, maybe 12. She sounded like a 45-year-old woman. I mean, her verbiage and command of the English language was unbelievable. I don't think she could have memorized all that. I may be wrong. Chinese kids are many times overachievers, especially in China. But no, she was brilliant. So kids are smart nowadays, and I've stopped smart. I mean, I am where I am. So we're taking on things that have not been addressed before with any big success. Vitiligo is one of them. I absolutely was positive that I could not topically get rid of vitiligo. I had a medical deal going that would have probably worked. I was working with a nanotech company outside of Beijing, China, funded by the Chinese government. Brilliant group of young scientists headed by a man named Dr. Autumn Y. And they liked me because I gave them out-of-the-box ideas that they could use. Because classically, in China, people study like crazy. They, take all kinds of classes, everything else. But in many cases, they're afraid to think out of the box. Now, this is changing nowadays because of the internet and so on. But basically, that was it. So here comes this crazy old scientist from America with ideas out of the box. So we exchanged things. They would give me test results that would cost me a fortune, and I would give them ideas. One of them was vitiligo. Now, catalase is the enzyme that can actually cancel out vitiligo, which is superoxidase. It's created by superoxidase, and it depigments large areas of the skin. So you can predominantly in black people, it really shows up, but white people get it too. And it could happen to anybody, anytime. And so I thought, how do we get catalase into the skin directly so it can negate that superclass state? And of course, the reason would be by injection. So I asked Dr. Wei, could you nanosize a little tiny biodegradable capsule with certain lifespan, with little pores in it, and we could pack it with catalase and then do a certain pattern of injections into the tissue. It would bleed out and is sub-Q and then cancel out the vitiligo-causing enzyme. Yes, it seemed theoretically very possible. Now, we never actually finished that project. I got too busy. I still think about it, but it wouldn't do DMK any good because then we'd have to be full medical and register and go through 10 years. It's a big pain in the butt. Who knows, maybe I gave them the idea they might do it someday, and that's fine. But now, according to Dr. Laconde, we can address vitiligo. So that's one future project.
What does it feel like to look at DMK now versus 50 years ago?
Oh, 58 years ago. Funny, the concept has never changed. The products have. I started out with Deep Pore Cleanser, Pro-Amino, Crimson-Trique, Biogen C, Actrol Powder, an acne cream, what else? Oh, Enzyme 1, 2, and 3, and Quick Peel. That was it. That was all I had. And yet we got great results even back then. So yeah, we've increased our arsenal 100 times over. And of course, time changes, climate changes, as you know. We're actually working on the second one, now don't laugh, on Spacezyme. We've got Stemzyme. We're coming up with Chromezyme, which deals with certain types of pigmentation for the darker toned people of the world. Then we're going to do Spacezyme, because when you go into outer space, and people will soon, sooner than you think, there'll be regular, charters going into beyond the atmosphere. They age as they come back in. Now, I'm not going to go into all the intricacies of why that's so, but they do age. So we're going to have treatments available for Spacezyme. And that's about it. Unless something else... one more thing. This is recent. That's all I need, is to add yet another thing on my back burner, ichthyosis. I often refer to ichthyosis, but we haven't encountered much of it over the years. It's a terrible skin anomaly. It's not life-threatening, but it's certainly life-altering. Ask anybody that has it. And I recently met a beautiful young woman, I talked about her earlier, that has it, and it's her whole body. And I'm determined to do something about it as far as we can go. We've already more or less conquered sebaceous, that keratosis of the skin that men often get with the big, huge, black raised plaques all over, usually on the back of their body and upper shoulders. We managed to get rid of that on a very prominent physician. And so we're going to tackle ichthyosis and see how far we can go with that. After that, who knows? I don't know what to think now. Do I retire? Certainly, if I become non-ambulatory and can't walk out on stage without crutches or walkers or wheelchair, yeah, that's time to exit stage left or stage right. If I start forgetting everything or repeating myself over and over, it's time to go, time to hang it all up. As long as I can still write, somehow the brain still thinks. In fact, it thinks too much. I've lived in my head my whole life. Honestly, that's really me. It's the man that lives in his head. I'll continue working, but I won't work as much. I don't have to. I really don't, but I want to. I honestly think that when people retire, they're retiring from a career probably they didn't really like that much, where they had to earn money for their family, or they're physically just tired, And I think that's the time you start going to doctors all the time. Unless you do something else, something you dreamed about years ago before you had a wife or a husband and kids and all these other people that you're responsible for. Now you're responsible for yourself. Kids are grown. Do something that you dreamed about a long time ago. You might surprise yourself. I probably would do that. But so far, I can't even imagine staying at home. If I have a long weekend or this holiday weekend, I get antsy. And I live in a beautiful, beautiful estate. So you'd think that I would love to be at home. And I do. But no, I'm still here, as the old song says. Looking at DMK now, after 58 years, as I said earlier, the concept is still the same, but it's involves so many thousands of people's lives all over the globe. And you know what this makes me feel? Obligated. I have a fiduciary sense of obligation to keep going as long as I possibly can. And if a big pharma comes and says, okay, we'll give you X amount of millions of dollars, and that's already happened with one of our distributors. But if they said it to me, I've got some saber rattling from some big companies. At this point, I'd have to say no. And the reason why is because I know what they'll do. They'll follow suit, all of our protocols, our methodology, all of that for maybe a year, 2 years, who knows. And then they'll start bottom lining, cutting this product or cutting the efficacy of that product or dropping this or taking that away because they have stockholders or, to please. They've got all that to do, so they'll start cutting. And I don't want that to be inflicted on all of these therapists and doctors and practitioners around the globe that have followed my methodology all these years. It's not fair. They've dedicated their life. I could do no less. So I would not take, 400 million, whatever, just for that. What would I do with it? I mean, how much? I'm an older man. How many estates can I live in? How many Jags or Lincolns can I drive? I mean, I've been everywhere, seen everything. I really don't need that much. And I've left provisions for people that are close to me and, of course, for the charity. But no, I would hesitate very strongly on doing such a thing. Even if they assured me by contract, oh, no, we won't change anything. And that's what's so weird is because these companies come along and buy companies like mine, and because they're attracted to the way we do things. Why would they come in and destroy it? It doesn't even make sense. Why not support it, amplify it, and go further? And this is what I would do if I were Unilever or L'Oreal or whoever. The only thing that I can pass on to the next generations of estheticians and practitioners, well, I've given a lot of advice so far, but I would say, besides knowing who you are, question yourself why you're doing it. Why are you doing it? To make money? Well, if you're good and you stick to your principles and concepts, you will make money. There's no question about that. Word of mouth is still one of the finest forms of advertising, you know. So if you are a natural healer, know that you're a natural healer and follow your gut. Yes, we give incredible education. It's ongoing education. But don't let that become parameters, you know. Use your head, use your gut, use your instincts. Try to do things beyond the actual education, not to the point of injury, because we have some formulas that could do harm if not used properly, but what you feel and think in your mind. Now, if you're in it just for money, you might just make good money for a while, but then that's it. It will not expand unless you go over the counter, and even that has its use-by date. Very, very few products make it an over-the-counter for a long time. And the ones that do are the ones that were really good in the first place, you know, the old standards. But I would say keep with the education, because ours is ongoing. But educate yourself elsewhere too, you know. DuckDuckGo and Google is there. Don't use these devices, these apps, as written in stone, because they're not. But if you read enough, long enough, you can ferret out the gems from the stuff that's not entirely true or speculative. But do continue educating yourself, because, as I always say at the end of every podcast, knowledge really is power. Thank you.